I've been running around like a madman. I'm trying to get on as many 2022 congressional candidates as possible, trying to give a
Hmm.
platform to everyone who is not only anti-mandate but who is also anti endless wars, because there are so many people pounding the drums that we need to go occupy Ukraine. And there's not much I can do. I don't have a Joe Rogan platform, but I'm trying to give a voice to any of the military veterans who know they can see an occupation on the horizon and they're going, we got to stop this before it starts. So that's what I've been doing, kind of working myself stupid. And yeah, have some potential big guests in the works that I cannot tell you about, but might be happening in the next month. Um, but aside from that, yeah. And
Well, let's talk about Ukraine now that you broached the subject. I sent you a couple
yeah, uh,
files this morning. What did you
yeah.
think of those?
Well, I've been running. I just finished my second podcast of the day. So I've seen your emails. I haven't even opened them up. So Russia provides new evidence of alleged bioweapons.
Yeah, and so let me go to your point about let's not have another war in Ukraine. The couple of pictures I put
Yeah.
down for you were
Stalingrad.
the old big tank battles that turned World War II. Remember, 25 to 30 million people die in this thing in Russia.
Yeah.
So when they hear we lost 500 they used to lose that before breakfast on any given day in World War II. So the ground literally soaked with blood. Okay, so my point here to all this is that this is their sacred ground. Catherine the Great was the one who um, called Odessa Novorossiysk. It was going to be the jewel on the Black Sea. Sochi down there is just around the bend from Ukraine, is the favorite spot for both Yeltsin and Putin. So they consider it very much a part of Russia, is what I'm saying. This isn't like something that's been traditionally NATO, if you will. And I'll let you take it from there.
Do you think they have a Sochi Min Trail?
Somebody asked, Aaron wanted to know if he wanted to jump in and do graphics. Yes, Aaron, I'll jump in and do, if you want to jump in and do graphics, that would be great. Let me copy this to the clipboard and email it to you. Just one second, Tommy. I'm going to get some graphics help here.
You're quite all right. A couple weeks ago, I was Tommy or Putin, and then I was Tommy Moisky, and today I'm Tom Bass of the Donbass region. I was thinking this morning, I was like, I got to come up with another name to slip in.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Tom Bass. Yeah, I love that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to go to some of my panels here for graphics as we talk. So I'm learning how to juggle here a little bit. But my point is if you look at those old tank battles, the tank battle of Kursk, which is just a little bit to the north in Belarus, we're talking, 500 people, like an hour die. Hundreds and hundreds of tanks destroyed in a day. There is this land going all the way through the tank battles that were in Kiev, the tank battles, or just the battles in Odessa and so forth. This was all ground that was fought over. If you've seen the movie Enemy at the Gates, you've seen what a stalemate Stalingrad was. Khrushchev was down there as an intelligence officer stopping the Nazis at the Volga River there. This is like our Alamo. Okay, the way Americans feel about the Alamo, even though it wasn't really a part of America. And then we sent down a couple of campers and they got slaughtered. And then we went in and took it all. This is their Alamo. That's the only way I can say this. This isn't even Cuba, which is kind of overseas, over waters. This is land connected here. And I just don't think, I think they are serious. I think Lavrov is serious when he says this is the last straw with NATO. And Putin saying the same thing. What's your take?
I don't know. I really don't know. I thought there was going to be like a definitive presentation of, unless I just haven't been paying attention. I thought that by now they maybe would have done like a definitive presentation of biolabs. But to me, there does just seem to be total cognitive dissonance about the idea that you can have one nation, America, you can have our enemy, Soviet Union, and you can have the enemy nation place weapons on a third party, Cuba, very close to us. That's bad. But when us, the United States, put on biolab weapons in Ukraine right next to Russia, they're not allowed to defend their own area. And it's just total cognitive dissonance. And it's the same people that just ate up. You got to get a shot. You got to get two shots. You got to get a booster. You got to get a second booster. I mean, a lot of these people didn't know what Ukraine was 3 weeks ago. They thought it was a construction company. And now they're all sitting here saying, like, put me in, coach. Send me over there. It's time for a no-fly zone. It's time for nuclear war. I mean, more than ever, I'm just convinced that the vast majority of the country are brain dead, and whoever can play the right tune, whoever can act as the orchestrator, the maestro, they're gonna, I don't know, walk us all off a cliff. I have less and less faith. Not to be a complete depressing.
Well, and you're the age where you could go. I mean, you're a little too old, but
I got bad vision. You can't send me.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
That's where you can when you go into the get your physical. You put your hands on your face, Mom.
Yeah.
Mom.
No, yeah. I'll just identify as a woman and say I got to stay home in the kitchens. Put me in the shell factories. I'll be Rosie the Riveter. I'll be Tommy the tank manufacturer.
There you go. In I think in Parma, Ohio.
Yeah, wherever.
Ukraine,
Yeah.
At a big tank manufacturing. Well, so I guess, let's say there was 6 provinces or 7 provinces. How many provinces in Canada actually touch the United States? All 9? Let's see. I can't name them all. It's one of those things. But let's say each one of those provinces, and I'm comparing these to the countries that are on the western edge of Russia, all promised that they wouldn't join NATO. Okay. And then all of them joined. Okay. So we had the Baltics, which is, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, not too big, it's like Delaware and Connecticut and Rhode Island. Doesn't really bother me that much, but I am kind of bothered by missile systems and stuff. That's all you need is a platform. But then you come down the way, and Poland obviously is a big player on the frontier. But then you add in Bulgaria, then you add in Slovakia, and then Romania starts talking about it, and then Moldova starts making noises. And then the last big one, which is, again, Russia's only land path to their Black Sea warm water seaport, which is in Sevastopol in Crimea. And this is closing off the last, part of the western frontier. And it also puts a hostile on the 3 choke points for their warm water port and trade in oil to get out of the Sea of Azov into the Black Sea, into the Mediterranean. So, I mean, it's hard to compare geography because the United States is just so blessed with so many states touching oceans, with 17 states, I think, something like that, and so many ports. But if we only had one port, if Washington, D.C. was the one port we had, you live down there on the Potomac, or near the mouth of the Potomac. If that was somehow under the control of another country, Russia, if that looked like it at all, that it could be closed off, I think we would react very similar to how Putin's reacting.
Yeah. I don't know. There's something doesn't add up because, as much as I don't agree with the forces in Washington, I also don't think they're stupid. I don't like them, but I'm not naive enough to say that they're stupid. I don't think you get into those upper echelons of power by being stupid. So something's not adding up at why we're egging them on to what seems to be a crash course ending in thermonuclear Armageddon. the escalation would go that way. And on one hand, you have people saying they want nuclear war because it's depopulation. If you want nuclear, well, depopulation implies that you want to stay on this planet, right? There are two trains of thought of where the elite going to go. Are they going to go off planet, or are they going to stay on this place? If they're staying on this place, they would do depopulation, but you wouldn't use thermonuclear warheads because you would salt the earth with cobalt and strontium and radioactive calcium for the next 100,000 years. So there's no logical conclusion to the nuclear war. I don't think it's stupidity. I also don't think it's incompetence. There's something that we don't know. And it's either that there was a backroom deal with Russia through back channels. This was all talked out before, and it said, hey, yeah, you can go this far and we won't step in, which is why we're doing a bunch of sort of formal moves, but blocking the MiGs from Poland, and we're only sending so much money, and we won't send any of our own people. We won't do a no-fly zone. Something about it seems like it was agreed beforehand that they could do this, and sure, we'd attack them, but it doesn't seem, I don't know, all the saber rattling almost seems like it's empty because both sides know that you can't do it. You can't, it's the end of the game. There's nothing, it's not cheating, it's just you're hitting reset on the Nintendo. The game's over. There is no nuclear war where you win. It's just over. The game is over. So it's either that this was scripted beforehand and that there was some backroom deal. Hey, we'll do this. And there's always going to come down to a pipeline. It's going to have something to do with a pipeline, but it's either that or we have a weapon system that you and I don't know about. We have something that some modern take on SDI has, we know with like 99.99% accuracy and consistency that we can neuter their nuclear forces. I don't know what that would be. I don't know how it would exist, but I'm also humble enough to know that the SR-71 Blackbird made its first flight in 1964, and that thing still seems like an alien craft. Maybe they got something cooked up out at the Nevada test site. Maybe they got something that some space-based weapon, some high echelon hypersonic drone fleet. I don't know what. I would imagine probably some sort of like orbital directed energy net. We either have something that can neuter their nuclear forces, or there was a backroom talk, and this is all bluster, and Putin and us both know it's only going so far. Those are just my two armchair takes on this.
Well, so I was actually in these countries when they were kind of collapsing, mostly Czechoslovakia and some in Hungary, which were the first two to go. And I was looking at business deals there, and I was with two lawyers who had been shot down there and had a lot of ties in the country and everything. So they were trying to get me set up in business at the time. So I was there, and I remember one of the key things was, the fear always of Russian tank invasion. That Russia had built so many tanks, and everybody had remembered how the Russians had responded and had beaten the Germans at the end of World War II with these massive T-34 tank
columns.
Assaults. Yeah. And so I was actually in after college graduation on the Czech border when it was it was 1982, and watching the Russian tank exercises. It is scary.
Oh yeah, sure.
They're doing wheelies, and it's like the cavalry. The dust cloud is amazing.
Yeah.
So and they had this thing that could snail's back kind of bridge where it could run this tank up, and it had this
whap when it goes over. Yeah.
And then they went over this island, and you could just see these things flooding over. And I can tell you, the people living in Germany and those countries were very scared of a NATO. I mean, we're scared of a Russian tank invasion. Because the Russians were doing these exercises with all these different Warsaw Pact countries. But that, since the fall of the Soviet Union, that's not the situation anymore. Czechoslovakia is a Western country now. Poland, pretty much a Western country. Hungary, the same way. Even the really the Belarus, which they used to call the 14th Russian state, and the other one was Romania, I think. have fallen away. So there's really not that threat anymore in Germany that there was. But I do think that in 1979, they were looking at this neutron bomb to get away from the thing you're talking about, which is it blows up and kills all the people temporarily through radiation poisoning, through neutrons, but leaves the building standing. And when they finally found that the half-life, the minimum half-life that they could get after one of these things went off was something like 200 years.
Yeah.
They gave up on it. And that's when I think they went to bioweapons. George H.W. Bush spoke at my college graduation at Miami University in 1982.
Really?
Yep. And all he talked about was removing a whole class of weapons. I remember he said this 12 times. Remove a whole class of weapons from the face of the earth from Europe, right? Because intermediate nuclear range missiles were the thing that Europeans didn't want. They would say, hey, we want NATO. We want the Americans and the bases. I lived in a town where there was a base near Bamberg, but we'd go down to watch the tank exercises down at the border. But they wanted that. They wanted the protection so that they wouldn't be overrun like, the other Warsaw Pact states, but they didn't want to be the battleground for a limited nuclear exchange. And I think that's where all these planners started with NATO saying, we got to go to something that slows the Russians down. We got to be able to go into, if we think they're doing a buildup, we have to be able to go into their areas where they have their livestock and they have their water supply. We got to be able to spread disease and slow them down before they can launch an offensive. So this idea of preemptive use of bioweapons or bioagents was a big part of the NATO thinking. And guys like Bob Kagan, who is the husband of Victoria Nuland, were the architects of this. Fred Kagan at the Institute of Study of War. This is like you mentioned, you hit the World of Warcraft or Call of Duty and you press reset.
Mm-hmm.
That's all he did.
Yeah.
He was in a tabletop world. So I think this in the former Republic states, and I'll flip it over to you in a second. But in the former states, they hired these Russians, these bioprep rat people. They said, go ahead and give us your stuff. We'll store it there. That's why it still hasn't been destroyed after 30 years, all this tularemia and botulism, et cetera. And we'll attenuate it. We'll develop vaccines for our guys, but then we'll also use it to slow the Russians down, right? And that's why you come up with these plans like Ukraine Program 4, which is the migratory birds, Ukraine Program 8, which is the Crimea Congo hemorrhagic fever. There's a program called 781, R781, which uses infected bats and fleas on infected bats. They decided to keep all these things around to use against the Soviet Union to slow them down, I think. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I don't know. It's either bioweapons are the new front, right? Kind of like DARPA creating the weapon systems of tomorrow. And speaking of the tweet you're showing right now, American sanctioned. I wish they would sanction me. I think that would be great press for the podcast if my name was up there between like Blinken and Milley. If you just said Tommy Carrigan, I think that would be great, and I'm pushing for that. I'm actively campaigning for that. But
that's funny. Go ahead, tweet it out. Sanction Tommy Carrigan.
Just sanction me too. I don't think they will because I've kind of been like not on board with like a massive NATO response. So maybe Ukraine will sanction me, not Russia.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, regardless though, part of me does try to look at like, could there be some like really big picture stuff going on, and could this actually kind of be like a continuation of Trump getting NATO to pony up for more money? Could this be a controlled, they do a backroom deal, they tell Russia you can go take whatever, and we're going to do a bunch of formal main channels, official channel condemnations, but we're going to remove you from the whatever, we're going to censor you, but we're not actually going to send in any tanks or anything. And Russia goes, okay, sure, and we're doing it because that will scare the shit out of NATO for them to start ponying up more and sort of tighten up their own defenses. I'm just trying to look at like what would be the benefit of us doing this. And it seems like on one hand you do a backroom deal with Russia, so they'll do it, and then you then use that fear to get the other countries to pony up a little more. And maybe you're doing that so because you're looking at a decade or two at the rise of China and you want to preemptively start to bulk up NATO now. I don't know. I'm just, again, as much as people like to attack the politicians they don't like, they're an idiot, they're stupid, they're not. You don't have to like them. That doesn't mean they're good people. They might be evil. These people are not incompetent. They're just not. You do not get to that spot if you're incompetent. You, by definition, you will not rise to that. Someone else will. The fact that they're there says they're not incompetent. So I just look at what's going on and I'm like, if it seems too wacky and stupid, we're heading towards nuclear war, there's something else going on. There's something else going on. I don't know what it is. We either have a weapon system that can take them down, or this entire thing has been coordinated so that we can scare the rest of Europe into bolstering up NATO, and Russia can, I don't know, drum up support at home for whatever. Something, a deal was made. I don't know what. Or we really are just marching into Armageddon, in which case, I don't know, smoke them if you got them. I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think that, there is a lot to be gained here, from Putin at home, right? Because you're going to back the leader who is, taking back the Ukraine and taking back, not the Ukraine, but I think there's a part of Russia, the Donbass for sure, and maybe even some could argue parts of the east of the Dnieper River that they paid for in blood in World War II, that they want that land.
Sure.
They want that land channel to Odessa, right? They don't want they're done with saying, hey, I'm going to get cut off. But I think you're right, though. Most people were starting to think that NATO was a Cold War relic.
Yeah.
And after the fall of the Soviet Union, it's really a Cold War relic, right? And when you start talking about, laptops and cell phones and so forth, where you make a lot more money if you have commerce, right, than if you have checkpoints, right? Checkpoints slow everything down. Maybe that's where they said, hey, we need a good war, and plus we could test out a lot of these tabletop exercises. We can test out a great thing about war is you can spray to your heart's content as far as bioweapons.
Yeah.
And everybody has to get vaccinated too. So it's a virus vaccine dream.
I'm starting to think it's something I never really thought of until I said it a couple minutes ago. I'm starting to think that this has nothing to do with Russia, and this is about them. Look, they've probably got some supercomputer or whatever that's been running tabletop exercises 100,000 times a second for the last decade, and maybe they're now with like 90% certainty they're like there will be an America Euro war with China and what in the year 2029, I don't know, 2033, whatever. Maybe they've got reason to believe it's coming. And we're just preemptively bolstering NATO forces. And this is all just the entire thing that's going on right now is just theater. It's we poked the bear so that the bear would bite at us, and that would cause all of NATO to go, all right, let's bolster up. And the reality is it has nothing to do with Russia. It's because we know that, war with China is coming. So instead of having war break out and then saying time to bolster up, maybe they want a decade of bolstering before we go to, I don't know. I'm trying to, maybe it's a stupid way to come from this, but I'm trying to look at this with the humility that if it looks like whatever we're doing is stupid, then it's probably not accurate. Love them or hate them, the military industrial intelligence complex, the swamp, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, they're not stupid, and no one wins with nuclear war. So there has to be something else going on here. I don't know what, but I'm just trying to think of what could it be. And I think it's to bolster NATO. Why bolster NATO now as opposed to last year or 5 years ago? We probably have, who knows, maybe the first shot of World War III was COVID. And right now it's still cold. and we're going, let's start slowly massing up all of NATO, either for a preemptive strike in China or to bolster it to such an absurd extent that there will be no war. I don't know. There's probably some like super forecasting computers that are looking at everything and they're saying now more than ever, like war with China's coming. And so what could you do to bolster your own defenses? I think you do something what you're doing right now. Ukraine would be the sacrificial cow.
Okay, well, let's take it. I'm going to take it into you. You've been speculating.
I'll speculate wildly. This is all the aliens. They're coming back to get the craft from 1947. This is all about Bob Lazar. I'll dial it up to 11 if you want to.
No.
Hey, I know.
No. I didn't want to go that direction.
I know.
No, but I will say this. There is some personal knowledge and personal reporting that I did. Again, by going and finding people, going and finding whistleblowers and so forth in Washington, that did say some things that kind of gave me a new perspective on a lot of this stuff. I was going to do a Cossack of Christopher Steele. You know Christopher Steele with the dossier? That probably was coming out the time you were getting out of college, right? Recently, Christopher Steele with MI6 and all that. Trump dossier.
I graduated in 2013.
Okay, so you've been out a long time.
Yeah, what are you talking about, George?
I apologize.
Get your head out of the clouds, George.
Okay. Well, thank you for not saying the other one. Yeah. Okay. So Christopher Steele had this relationship with Porton Down. And this goes back 10 years with me. Okay, going down to Salisbury, and I went to this town called Andover, met this guy, and basically he said the NATO doesn't want to do bioweapons. They don't want to be seen as doing bioweapons. They're all signatories to this convention. That's the BWC convention. And so they can't do it. They have to have a third party do it. And the big goal with George W. Bush and also Richard Dearlove at that time of MI6 was, hey, as soon as we get our hands on these old biopreparat scientists, we basically inherit a bioweapons program. We weren't really doing that as much as the Soviets were. The Soviets were putting all their money on bioweapons because they couldn't match us nuke for nuke.
It's the best dollar invested.
Yeah, it's the best asymmetric thing, which is you attack us and we all die right away, but we fire off all our missiles and you all die a slow, painful death over a year.
Yeah.
That kind of
mutual assured destruction.
Yeah, mutual assured destruction, but this was with the bioweapons.
Yeah.
And you interviewed Ken Albeck, 28 times now? How many times?
7.
And he's the guy who ran the program.
Yeah.
Okay, with thousands, 5,000, 6,000 scientists. So anyway, the guy who was at the Moscow desk for MI6 was Christopher Steele. And he saw all these guys at the fall of the Soviet Union. He was in there when Yeltsin got on the tank and made the speech. They even had a tank pointing at I wasn't in Moscow, but I just interviewed a guy who was there, where all these guys stayed that were selling Russia by the pound, and they actually had the tank pointing right at their house, Christopher Steele's house, and the wife, Laura, I can't remember her name, Steele's wife, Kathy, Lauren Graham. Anyway, the bottom line is he was there to get all the scientists. He was there to say, make a deal. Let's make a deal. Let's meet with these Russian scientists. And we had a guest on with this Gary Winkleman who was actually there, and it was actually all happening in his lobby of his inner tourist hotel, right? But they had all these colonels and generals and so forth running these different programs in this hotel, making these deals. And the number one guy making the deal was a guy named Mark Rich, which is the associate of Bob Maxwell. And the place they were going was Ukraine, both for the nuclear and for the fact it's more Western than Kazakhstan, which is more toward Asia. Georgia also, but not as much as the destination Ukraine was the juice. If you were an old biopreparat guy working, out in the middle of some, camel prairie, in Kazakhstan or freezing your butt off in in the winter, you're moved to the Black Sea. You could go to Sochi, and then you're close enough for skiing, and all of a sudden, this was a step up if you were a bioweapons engineer to go to Ukraine. And Christopher Steele went with his bride, this can't remember her name, Kathy Lauren Steele, and he did the Cossack dance at the wedding in Kiev. He had his wedding with this gal in Kiev. All the oligarchs, all the Ukrainian oligarchs were there. All the bioweapons oligarchs, Kolomoisky and Mogilevich and Mark Rich had this huge wedding, and he did the Cossack dance. Literally did the Cossack dance for these bioweapons. And people don't understand the Cossack dance was the launch of the bioweapons program. It was the movement of these bioweapons from Kazakhstan and Georgia and other places in Russia to these labs. This is where it all funneled down to. And they've been trying to figure out, what do we do with this stuff now? How can we make some money on this stuff but not cause World War III or bio World War III? And I have presented it, and people said that never came true. There never was bioweapons in Ukraine. The Cossack dance wasn't a Cossack dance for bioweapons. Well, look at where we are now. It seems like it's a Cossack dance for bioweapons. I don't know. You ever heard the Christopher Steele story with the Cossack dancing?
No.
For bioweapons? Never? Okay.
Sorry. No, not at all.
There's Kolomoisky.
Yeah, I was about to say, Kolomoisky.
I sent you a picture of her, though.
Yeah, I know. Who, Kolomoisky?
I sent you a picture of Christopher Steele.
Yeah.
I think.
Like I said, I didn't even check those emails till you and I started talking.
Okay. Maybe I can put some up here, but
no, you're fine. Side question: what was the $1.5 trillion bill that was passed? The omnibus bill. You just had it in the tweet. You just scrolled past the one right above this one. I honestly haven't. It just kind of nothing to do with the conversation we're having right now. What is the $1.5 trillion omnibus bill?
It was sort of an omnibus bill. This was her here. She died of fast liver cancer or fast cirrhosis, and there's the picture of her.
Got it.
I don't know if you see that.
Yeah, I can see it.
That's her, and then that's him. And anyway, 13 billion of that. Maybe I'll go to a different shot here. 13 billion. Let me go to this shot right here. I'll do a bigger picture.
Mm-hmm. I can see her.
You can see her, okay.
Yeah.
But it was 13.6 billion for Ukraine.
But what was the 1.5 bill? That was just a big bill?
Yeah, it was like an omnibus bill, I thought. And again, they always do this. They have some side issue.
Yeah.
Which, it's such a small part of the bill.
Yeah, and right? You can't pick it apart. It's like how they'll put in like the entire bill for the DoD, and then it'll also be like, and here's $300 million for gender studies to Pakistan. And if you oppose it, it's like, oh, are you against the U.S. military? And it's like, well, no, but it's, no.
It's log rolling.
Yeah.
It's log rolling, but it's beyond log rolling now, that's the little tail on the donkey they used to do to get a bill through. But this is the other way around. This is the tail wagging the dog. It's all about Ukraine, right? Wag the dog here with Ukraine. And then we get another 1.5 billion for a whole bunch of stuff nobody ever even talked about. It's all about whether we should give Ukraine another 15 billion. It's going right back to these bioweapons labs or biodefense labs. I just wish somebody would have said, be honest with the American people and say, look at this, people. MI6 and George Bush, he did the speech, 1,000 Points of Light. He was talking about 1,000 scientists, right? And 1,000 intelligence officers coming over to our side, right? And now we're going to be able to have this bioweapons program. We didn't pay a dime for it, right? And the Cossack dance, I met with the guy who released the Trump dossier, Michael Isikoff from Yahoo News at one of the trials. And I was going to ask him because he was at the second marriage. Remember, she dies of fast cancer. Tommy, I'm telling you, I looked at her symptoms. I went through the little town she died in. I'm telling you, Congo, Crimea, hemorrhagic fever.
Really?
fast hepatic liver disease. But and of course, later on, the people that Skripal, the guy who was giving all the names of all the bioagents, scientists from BioPreparat, right, to Christopher Steele, he ends up getting poisoned in Salisbury, not too far from Andover. So anyway, I just wish people would say, here's what happened. We needed to bring all these scientists over. We brought down Christopher Steele to run the operation, to bring all these guys into Ukraine. He did the Cossack dance. We needed a couple of oligarchs who were going to make some money in the virus vaccine game. We're going to attenuate these bioweapons. We're going to do controlled releases. We're not going to tell you where, so you don't, so you act natural. And then we're going to make trillions on the vaccines. And we're going to, try to scare the crap out of you. And we just need to do that to have a series of gradual earthquakes rather than a gigantic earthquake of a bio attack. To me, that's what it seems like they're doing. I think that's the logic behind this, that, hey, as long as we're doing this, we should be trillionaires. We should be trillionaires. We'll have Kolomoisky run this operation, because it seems like what they're doing now is they're putting a whole bunch of guys into a siege, like a Stalingrad-like siege, where it's a bioweapons dream, where you can just spray to your heart's content, and everybody has to be vaccinated is the other thing. It just seems like the only guy who's making the money here, his name isn't being said, is this Kolomoisky guy. And you were Tommy Moisky, and you were pretty close to the same name.
I was Tommy Moisky. I served with Kolomoisky back in the KGB. Can you go back to, I think last week we concluded that there was 14 or 16 biolabs, but I saw you tweeted the other day that says there's 30 biolabs. Could you go into that?
Yeah, they don't call me up and tell me when they add new ones, unfortunately, but the Russians said there was 30. The Minister of Defense, the one general named Kona, came out and said that. He had another guy named Kirilov do 2 more briefings. Kona did another briefing about the biolabs. They sent Never Nevsky as their Russian diplomat to the United Nations. He also talked about the bioweapons and there being 30. So they're pretty sold on the idea that there's 30. And you saw me earlier showing pictures of Obama being handed a vial, in 2005 in Kiev. Well, what had happened is the Kiev one kind of blew up, where there's 6 labs there now. And the other one was Lviv in the West, and they have 3 or 4 labs now, where they only had 1. Plus they added 2, it seemed like, in Odessa, and it seemed like they doubled up in a lot of places. And it seems like it's like there's more labs in Ukraine. There's 10 times more bio labs in Ukraine than there is in Texas, which is on our southern border, for crying out loud. It doesn't seem proportional if it's not offensive.
So when is Russia going to show undeniable evidence that this is what this is? I mean, if they've got the evidence, and you've said it before, they have to show it. They have to present it. Otherwise, they are, rightfully so, just going to be seen as a belligerent nation. They got to come up with the goods. You're muted.
Okay. Well, I've showed a couple of papers as we've scrolled through here where it's Black and Veatch was the contractor, and UP8 is Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever. UP4 is the migratory birds with fleas and ticks with H1N1, H5N1. R781 is this taking the bats that are infected with fleas and then vectoring them somehow. I'm talking driving bats in a truck and then releasing them all at night and then driving the truck back, or driving the truck between Ukraine and Georgia. Kolomoisky's live bats, like a pizza truck, and then leaving these things go. And then they find these rookeries and then they infect the livestock. So they produce the papers for these. I mean, this is the program. Now, so to me, it would be there's two strategies here with NATO. They could say, well, yes, they're for biodefense. And let's go down the line here. UP8 is actually because we had that because of this. And UP4 is we had that because of this. If it was a point by point explanation of what those programs really are and why they aren't bioweapons programs, that would be great. Because then we would go, oh, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. They don't want something to kill the cattle, or they don't want something, so they're using the bats to be the reservoir. I get it. Okay, they don't want pigs and African swine flu to break out, so they're using migratory birds for whatever reason. There's some explanation, is what I'm saying. But saying that the labs don't exist and you're a Putin's, chump or puppet, yeah, I'm looking right at the papers. I mean, the papers are right there. Just was this released the Kraken? Do you think this was the Kraken that they were talking about releasing?
I don't,
release the Kraken. I don't know.
it definitely seems. Sorry, interrupted you.
Go ahead. I was just saying that Kraken was that Norse god of bioweapons. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it definitely seems like I mean, like thermonuclear warheads on the tips of missiles are like it's like the upper limit, both literally in that they're going to orbit and figuratively. It's like that's kind of the end of the world. So the next step is you have to kind of find how close can you get to that. Like there used to be like an Onion article from the 2000s, and it was like, before nuclear war, there will be a fantastic buildup of conventional weapons. Like we'll see all these wonderful conventional non-nuclear weapons, and then they'll go nuclear. It kind of seems like bioweapons are the next level, right? I mean, what was the original? The original A-bomb obviously was to end the war, be a force of God, but then what it also was force amplification. We don't need to match the Soviets tank column for tank column. We have Eisenhower talking about we just need tactical nukes on all these different like land straits and land bridges, and then we can defend the United States and the rest of the world. And as everyone gets them, they kind of level out the world. There's almost like a new arms race, like subatomic, if that makes sense. Not like subatomic physics. I mean, like below atomic, and that's bio, right? You can still do bio. There's huge amounts of deniability, unlike an A-bomb, where you can see where it's launched from or from what plane it's dropped. It seems like bioweapons are sort of like the next upper echelon. We're like, no one wants to go full Ebola. Nobody wants to go full, right? Nobody wants to wipe out the earth. It's the same thing with nuclear weapons. There's this sort of like, how tactically can we toe the line? Because they have the best ROI, return on investment. You don't need F-35s and F-22s and NSA satellites and quantum computing if you can just, I don't know, take a pig and splice it with a giraffe or something and come up with some monstrous virus. It does seem to be the sort of new arms race, even though it's not as dangerous as thermonuclear Armageddon. Thermonuclear is like, okay, we can't use it because it's the end of the world. Like, what's the next nuke but not nuke that we can use? What's the next thing that has that sort of show-stopping power of like a nuclear weapon without ending the world? Do you know what I mean? Like, where
Sure.
can we get like a Hiroshima Part 2 but not be a global suicide?
Yeah, they call it low intensity warfare.
Yeah.
The special operations low intensity warfare is called SOLIC, and it's at Fort Belvoir and it's at Fort Bragg. And so I look at this and say, that's exactly what's going on here. If I can make trillions as we do biopreparation, I have limited outbreaks among livestock. But see, the Russians are saying, no. There was a huge outbreak that you guys caused in 2018 in Georgia. There's been all these outbreaks of African swine flu that we've never had before. There's all these outbreaks of these hemorrhagic fevers that we haven't had before.
Sorry, I'm looking.
Sort of
I'm looking at the emails you sent me. I don't want you to think I'm playing on my phone.
Oh, no, that's fine. Well, again, I don't have a lot of video of Cossack dancing, but I think Cossack dancing may explain this whole thing, because if people just accept the fact that
Did
They accept the fact that Christopher Steele was put in charge of this for DynCorp. DynCorp was and DynPort was a joint venture between DynCorp and Port and Down. He lives right down there. That's where the gal died. Portsmouth was in England, was where they did all the Operation Sea Spray.
I was born in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Really, you were born right there by George Bush's favorite in Maine. There,
Kenny Bunkport.
Kenny Bunkport, but the Navy base there was split between Newport and what's the river there? The Nisqually.
I don't remember. They're all named after Native American things. I don't know. Despite as fluorescent white as I am, I'm actually I'm part Native American. I'm 99% Irish pig, and then part of me is Native American. But what I was going to say is, you haven't pulled up Peter Strzok. Did he tweet at you?
Yes,
he did. After you and I did that episode.
Yeah, you triggered him.
Yes. yes. I don't even care if it's going to result in my death. It just means that the podcast is succeeding. That's all. I'm excited about that.
I think it's funny because as soon as he came at me and said I was a Q guy, and I'm not. I'm totally anti-Q.
I am Q.
You are Q.
A lot of people don't know that. Sorry, keep going.
Okay. Well, I said, yes, I am a Q follower. I follow your Q level
clearance.
Yeah, all your bioweapons programs. So in a sense, he's right. I am a Q follower of his bioweapons programs in Ukraine. But then I thought, well, it's also Sarah Strzok, and I don't know if she's related, but there's only 100 Strzoks in the United States. Sarah Strzok does Q fever. Sarah Strzok is an expert in Q fever.
The hell's that?
Q fever is like Congo, Crimea, hemorrhagic fever. But it's very hard to diagnose. And see, the beauty in creating panic, right, in a population, or terror in a population, that this is the world according to Strzok, right, is take something from Africa that's never been in this place before, and none of the doctors know how to. And then you bury it under a mild virus like coronavirus, and for the people you want to take out, you Q fever them. And this is all, I'm not saying this is an admission that he used Q fever I've always felt like there's, like Paul Cottrell is another guy I did a lot of podcasts with. We talked a lot about, is there another spike? Is this the feint? Is coronavirus the feint? And then there's another killer spike, like, the old Spanish flu spike, or some other, Ebola spike, or some other HIV spike.
I think COVID was it.
Well, COVID could be.
I think COVID was a dry run.
Yeah, but COVID could be. We talked a lot about, in 2017, I was talking a lot about what I called Clockwork Orange, which is when you want to lock down a population. I realized that there was Operation Lockstep, but you create about 95% fear. But you have to have a little blood for people to be afraid. And then you mix them together, you get orange, right? But it's a clockwork action. It's a clockwork action where you just keep coming out with new variants, and you just drub people literally like they did the Jews, just gradualism. Just keep pushing them back, till they're finally they've lost all will to live. It's like ant in the glass. You knock the ant down in the
so many
glass,
times.
So many times it stops trying to get out.
On a side note, I do partially blame you for why I'm so tired right now. It's because I was hanging out with some friends the other night, and you sent me that message about Peter Strzok kind of commenting on the episode we did. And I celebrated. I was like, we were having a couple beers, and I was like, oh, this is great. We're getting some traction. And we just got totally shit-faced, and I'm having like a 2-day hangover from it. So I do partially lay that blame on your shoulders. I just want you to know that. But
I figured Carrigan on St. Patty's Day.
I was good until like 9 p.m. I was like, nah, I'm not going to do anything wild today. And then I woke up at 2 p.m. the next day, and my shirt was torn down the middle. I mean, from chest to belly button. But yeah,
That's probably. Did you identify the girls that did it, or was it just one?
I wish. No, I think it was me, and which is even worse. I think it was just me. But you do look at what's going on right now, it does seem to be that we're kind of entering the age of biowarfare, and it seems so silly, right? Because you think of like technological progression, and like in your mind, thermonuclear Armageddon would be the apex. But I do think it's like we went too far, and there's no winning, so we have to come back. We have to come back a little bit. We got to come a little bit back from the edge, and man, forget what was so insane about like was it Yugoslavia or Serbia? Yugoslavia, not Slavia, Slavia or Serbia. Whenever we first started, I guess 93 kind of also really showing off the precision weapons, the laser guided, the JDAMs, right? We don't got to carpet bomb whole corridors or whole city blocks anymore. Now we can fly it down a chimney, right? That was the level of precision. I mean, what would be the next technological level of precision? You can only have your JDAM get within so close to the target, whether it's plus or minus a foot or plus or minus an inch. Ultimately, it doesn't matter when you have something with a blast radius of 1,000 feet. So, what's the next level of precision? And it's going after a genetic population. That is it,
Right.
where you can release it, where it can you can release it on Irish pigs, and me and George could be next to each other, and we both take in the sea spray, and I drop dead in an hour, and you're fine. It seems like that's kind of what
That's
this
the latest
is.
Bond. That's the latest Bond movie. That's the latest Bond movie. Or if you were in a crowd in let's say Hong Kong protesting against the
Uh
Chinese,
huh.
and you got sprayed, and a little bit of those plasmons accumulated in your lungs, and then you went to another thing, you got sprayed again, and you went to another thing, and gradually you accumulate these things that absorb energy, right? And then we can get you into certain bottleneck areas where we hit you with a lot of energy to try to identify the terrorist in our minds. This is the Michael Chertoff world. This is why, well, I won't go into it, but
Yeah, you,
I think this is the plan here, the biosurveillance
I
plan.
think you're kind of on to something though, right? It's almost like a totalitarian dystopia version of like a coffee card, where you punch out the card 10 times and then you get a free cup. It would be like you're getting a little bit of this attenuated virus every time you go to something that the government doesn't like a protest. And like you can go to like one or two protests, but if you're at every single protest, if you're, if you're some modern day MLK or whatever, you're a Snowden or a Greenwald or whatever, Whitney Webb, and you're kind of a George Webb, if you're questioning these things and you end up at more and more of these dissident things that the government doesn't like, you're kind of like punching out your coffee card, where just by default, if you go to like 10 of these things, you start to reach like a lethal level.
Yeah, and that actually, if you look at the Guardian anti crowd control device that Raytheon makes, they talk about that
Oh,
when they say
yeah.
you can single out the leaders,
Oh,
you
sure.
know, and that way the regular population only feels a warming and they leave, but the leader has a heart attack,
Mm-hmm.
has myocarditis,
Carditis.
carditis immediately develops into anemia, and or, excuse me, in a kind of a fusion. So I think there's something to this. I really think that the coronavirus is for the biosurveillance, I think.
Okay.
But then there's, as long as we have this beautiful cover of this thing can kill, now we have Q fever on the shelf in Ukraine. We've got Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever, an attenuated version on the shelf in Ukraine. We have Ebola, we have Zika, we have Lassa fever, we have Nipah. We got a whole shelf full of spices here. Let's get spicy. Let's use some spices. And now we can start shaping the world politically how we want to. Again, every time we cause a revolution, Soros is there for the little currency manipulation. Hey, that was fun. We made a couple $100 million this weekend. So they've kind of got this down to a cookie cutter. This is kind of a McDonald's now. For instead of flipping burgers, you're flipping countries.
Yeah.
And it's very profitable. And that's why I think this biowarfare is decimate the economy, buy all the assets up for 10 cents on the dollar, move everybody now through a war. It gets everybody to leave. Now I buy everything really cheap. Then I get a whole bunch of reconstruction money. from
Mm-hmm.
NATO, and then I build high rises like Kolomoisky did in Cleveland. It seems like a virtuous cycle. I don't see any point along the way where Kolomoisky takes a hit in that he's living in a villa during the and eating a ham sandwich, or not a ham sandwich, probably a turkey sandwich, while he's watching the war in Tel Aviv or Geneva, and he's typing his computer and buying certain things as the war's going, and then he just comes in afterward, gets all the. He's already got the 13 billion. This is when I'm used to this on Capitol Hill. As soon as they get the check, the war goes away. But maybe they're going to keep going here for some reason because they have some bigger design with NATO. I really think Trump undermined or created a question in people's mind. Why do we still have NATO?
Sure.
That ended 30 years ago. Why do we need it? And maybe this is hey, we need another war to keep NATO.
That might be it too. It might have been that Trump was getting involved because, right, it's not just the U.S. It's not just U.S. contracts, or it's not just the U.S. defense budget. It's also, I mean, if they're using our weapon systems, NATO is a huge market of people that, Will Arkin talks about it in The Generals Have No Clothes, about how, like, we have our military, but all of our allies use the weapons we sell them, and they all link into our systems, our satellite systems, our communications systems, and in essence, they amplify our military. And if Trump's going in there and saying we don't need to do this, if we're sending foreign aid to NATO and then NATO uses that to buy our weapons from us, yeah, if you're going in there and saying we don't need NATO anymore, well, yeah, now you're messing with their nut. You're messing with their money. That might be that. It might be this is a rattle the cage. Hey, we need NATO. It might be that. I don't know. It could very well be that.
Well, I certainly think NATO sits around all day and tries to come up with ways of justifying their existence, and they have for 30 years. But this is the best one yet. Really, this is the first invasion that I remember. There was I'm trying to remember back where Georgia was a little tiny incursion.
Yeah, that was 2008, right?
Yeah, 2008. That was a little tiny incursion. There wasn't really any Russian tanks rolling anywhere other than that. This is the big one as far as since I've been out of college. And where NATO actually, even though they're not a NATO partner, where NATO is so involved in the news, as far as whether they're going to go defend or not.
Yeah. Oh, what was I going to say? I had an idea. I don't remember what it was. Damn it, George.
I had done a lot of stories about how Kolomoisky also was in charge of this thing called MABNY, which is military assets vitally needed in case of insurrection in the United States. They've had these sort of staged or provoked insurrections with these guys out of Fort Belvoir, Fort Psychops. They brought over these Ukrainians, the same NABU crime unit from Kiev, to put people into the Trump campaign. So they were there on January 6th. So maybe they're trying to bolster up the Ukrainian armies for the occupation of the United States. I don't know. It just seems like there's some kind of buildup here in money for these NATO troops. And then now we're going to have Azov Brigade here in the United States. I mean, these are going to be your new policemen. That's not good.
It does seem... I keep having the thought and slipping the thought. Again, this is your fault, George. I've got a 2-day hangover going on. Shit. Maybe the idea is we're sort of imprinting into the mass mind, a reflexive invasion bad, so that, hey, there he is, George Webb on Stu Peters. Maybe we put in a reflexive imprint to the mind right now of the public, right? Just everyone change your profile picture to Ukraine. This is bad, invasion bad, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they're doing that to sort of, it's like every once in a while you hear about like a comedian, like a real scumbag comedian will go open for somebody, and towards the end of their opening, they'll use some of the main acts jokes, and they'll steal their thunder. It's like a power move. It's like total scummy thing, but it's like a power move. maybe we're sort of priming the world for like, you're right. Everyone rises up. We will all sanction it in unified lockstep if anyone invades another country. And then maybe it's just kind of like, all right, China, your move. Like, can you touch Taiwan now? The entire world is primed for, you know, we have a bunch of liberals foaming at the mouth about how we need to send in, how we need to establish a no-fly zone in Ukraine. Like, how else would you get? Who knows? Maybe they were just priming everybody for uh, global condemnation of anyone that invades anyone else's borders. Of course, not including the United States with Iraq, but
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that nuclear, because this is why I did the Cossack dance. Remember, we get all their bios from BioPrep and Ken Ellebeck. You should ask Ken Ellebeck if he knows Christopher Steele. I know those guys don't know each other.
I sent him an email. I haven't heard from him. I had Ken on like every other week for like 8 weeks. And I haven't. He's just been busy for like the last 7 months. I just can't get in touch with him.
Well, this is a good question for him, because the Cossack dance. Ask him about the Cossack dance at the wedding there in Kiev. You remember, Kolomoisky is so close to the current guy running the country, Zelensky. He paid for he has the car that Zelensky gets driven in. All the guys that are all the security guys that drive him around are Kolomoisky guys. Kolomoisky owns the television stations that created Zelensky as a national figure. You know, as far as all the bank, private bank, he can do whatever he wants with the money he gets from the United States. No strings attached. Nobody looking over his shoulder. No anti-corruption police. They've got this NABU crime unit, which is really just an extension of the old KGB. That when Soviet Union fell, it became Alpha Group. And then Alpha Group, a lot of the soldiers or a lot of the intelligence officers ended up working in the crime unit. Just basically became a Schutzstaffel, you know, an SS for Peter Strzok. They use the SS symbol. Azov Brigade just turns the SS symbol on the side, the Schutzstaffen, right? So I think that's how we should see it. We should say it all started with a Cossack dance by Christopher Steele. And the interesting thing about his wife, and she died so young, but his wife, Lauren, her father was this guy named David Hunt. And David Hunt in England was sort of their Oppenheimer, or their Albert Einstein. Probably more their, I don't know, some other Enrico Fermi or somebody like that. Well, that's Italy's great atomic scientist, but somebody like that, or really high profile, David Hunt. Like, go to Buckingham Palace as the top nuke scientists. Okay. And they were going to profit, same thing, from her dad's relationship, because they were going to get all the nukes. They were going to get all this highly enriched uranium that took 50 years to make, or 40 years to make. And they were going to be able to keep that. And instead of destroying that right away, be able to downblend it and use it for nuclear power to do nuclear exploration, and even maybe test a bomb here and there for, well, they did 800 or 900 peaceful nuclear explosions for finding oil and minerals. So she was in there for that, for her dad's connections. And a lot of the nuclear industry was already in Ukraine, but then it moved there because of David Hunt. I think David Hunt was David, if you're out there, I'd love to interview you, or Tommy Carrigan can interview you. He was at the wedding as well. He could tell us who was at the wedding. I think the daughter died awfully fast. You know, she wasn't a big drinker. But anyway, this is the sidebar that I don't have proof of. But when she was in Moscow, and Yeltsin was in power, and I can't remember who was in before Yeltsin, but she was sort of being treated like an English diplomat. And they had their apartment very close to, and he was never around, and they had their apartment close to Red Square. And so I'll have to ask Gary about this, but accepting a lot of gifts like really super expensive artwork and expensive, rugs. She's like a collector, and having a lot of, I don't know, just seems like, how many rugs can somebody collect? Can you really have 10,000 antique rugs? I don't know. It just seems like an excuse to have a very dashing KGB agent come over with yet another rug. The rug salesman thing. It's like the milk delivery. I don't know. She had this ungodly number of rugs. I just thought, they're going to send somebody over there if they know the husband is the head of the bioweapons program, and her father has all the nuclear knowledge of how to profit from the nuke. This is both the restructuring of an entire nuclear industry of a whole 50 years of nuclear centrifugation, to develop the uranium. There's a huge amount of money to be made on the nuke side and a huge amount of money to be made on the bio side. I don't know. She apparently did not find Christopher Steele that attractive, and she took a lot of visitors that gave her rugs. I don't know what to make of it. I'm not saying the rug salesman was a young Vladimir Putin, but I've heard that the rug guy was a young Vladimir Putin, 1990.
Vladimir Putin was selling rugs.
Taking rugs, very expensive ornamental rugs. No, gifts. I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently it helped engineer his group to not overthrow Yeltsin, but to engineer a sort of a mini coup with Chris Steele and Vladimir, like they were together at one point. The rug was a cover or something. I don't know. Or worse yet, there was a relationship between his wife and Vladimir Putin, and the rug was a cover for that. But in either case, in only one hop, I love these stories where you're only one hop away from the story, the people that are involved. I'm standing there with Michael Iskoff and McDuff in the trial, and here's the guy who was at the wedding. I don't know if I didn't get a chance to ask him if he was at the first wedding, the Cossack dance wedding. But man, wouldn't that have been great wedding footage to see? If Vladimir Putin was there, you remember the table where Vladimir Putin was sitting with Mike Flynn, and then Jill Stein. I'm sorry, I'm on a bender here.
I'm just listening. Keep going.
Jill Stein of the Green Party was sitting at the same table, and then there was a German guy minister from Germany, and then there was Peskov, who was one of the press agents for Putin, and then the other guy who was always running around with Putin. And it almost is a recreation. That photo is almost a recreation, supposedly, of how close, like it was Putin at this wedding, Christopher Steele and the girl. That's how they sat at their wedding table. Putin was at the wedding table, and the story I heard. This is wacky conspiracy theory, but the story I heard was that they shot that picture as sort of the Mike Flynn, Russia, hand in the cookie jar that will make Trump Russia believable because he's sitting there with Putin. They based it off the photograph of Christopher Steele and the girl, the rug girl. She collected something else. Oh, and here's the other weird thing, Tommy. They stole her shoes. The KGB stole her shoes. And her favorite pair of shoes. She also liked shoes, not like Imelda Marcos likes shoes, but she likes shoes. And they stole her shoes, and I say they got the DNA from like the sweat and so forth in the bottom of the shoe. And they targeted her with some kind of fast something. I don't know if it was the Russians and Putin, or if it was Kolomoisky, and she was talking about how they were getting the bioweapons, or talking how they were getting the nukes. But I did a lot of research on this guy named Rodney Fisk. That's why I put it in the Kolomoisky video. where he actually negotiated the agreement for the 20,000 warheads to come to the United States to be used for peaceful use. It was called megatons to megawatts. And he's just like a totally fictitious South African guy. You know, like it's Mark Rich with any other name, right? Anybody who would have talked about that mega transfer of wealth, trillion transfer of wealth to Israel and South Africa, would just be Mossaded. They just get they just get Hagen out.
Hagen dead.
Hagen dead.
Be Hagen dead.
I'm sorry, Tommy. I shouldn't have told you that. It was told to me by somebody who.
I don't care.
Yeah.
Why would I care?
Well, Christopher Steele. I went to this Magnolia Hotel, and he met with. The reason I'm saying this is because I know it's a crazy story. Nobody will believe, but Nellie Orr will believe it. Bruce Orr will believe it, and Peter Strzok will believe it, and they'll know I was talking to a good source, because they'll know that they were there at the Magnolia Hotel with Christopher Steele for this meeting where they were talking Trump Russia, and the person claimed to have known and seen them having this meal at the Magnolia Hotel. I think what I'm trying to say is Strzok knows there are witnesses all over the place for what really happened with the biolabs in Ukraine. And we're not going to get by much longer with just saying they don't exist, because there's just evidence every other day the Russians are coming out with. So at some point, they're going to have to switch gears and either release a bioweapon and then blame it on the Russians, something to change the narrative. Because right now what's happening is just kind of this watching Hercule Poirot kind of just slowly solve a crime, and you're sitting there in the train car and there's nowhere for you to go. And you're just watching Hercule Poirot just kind of, or, Sherlock Holmes figure the crime out. That's why I think he lashed out at me, is because he kind of says, hey, this isn't going the way I wanted it to. This was all supposed to be secret.
Yeah.
We were supposed to get trillions out of this. This isn't going good. I think it's a very small group of people.
Yeah. Could you maybe go in and just explain real quick? I got about 20 minutes left before I got to bounce. Could you go in and kind of give me, well, actually, I'm going to use the restroom first, but I kind of want you to give me like a rundown and exactly like who Kolomoisky is, just so I get a good image of him. George, monologue. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Hey, everybody. Sorry I went into that monologue before this. It's just some Christopher Steele folklore. And I've been fascinated by this ever since Gary Winkleman called me before I ever went on the road. I was in Portland in 2016 and was describing this scene. And he's running this Intertourista hotel, which was all KGB. They now have tours at these Intertourista hotels. And in the hotel were all these just Russian generals coming in all the time, telling Western businessmen where stuff was: weapons, bullets, gas masks, all the stuff of war. John Travolta did a movie about it. But in addition to that, there was a high probability that they were negotiating and selling off all the nuclear and biological. And the guy that the West chose, I'm not sure if I think it was because Christopher Steele spoke such good Russian, Cambridge and all that. And plus he had been from, I guess, the same university as the Cambridge Five, so he was a good double agent, I guess. But he was the guy chosen to be the broker in Ukraine. And it's kind of funny because even though the Steele dossier came from Ukraine, from the NABU crime unit in Kiev, and even though the Black Ledger came from Kiev, and even though all the compromise operations in Cyprus with the Russians and all that was all a Ukraine operation, somehow everybody associates the Trump dossier with England. We published one photograph of Richard Steele in Kensington in front of a brownstone, and all of a sudden that's the only place we can envision Christopher Steele. I'm not saying Michael Isikoff said this. No, not Michael Isikoff. Did not tell me this. Although Michael Isikoff probably was at the first wedding, but it is somebody in the press. I'll say that. Oh boy, I don't want to get in any trouble.
Are you getting me in trouble?
No, I'm not getting you in trouble.
What did I do to you?
No. I'm just saying that
the abuse.
It seems the best way to do research in journalism, right, is rather than like look at the tree and go, oh, I just saw a leaf fall off, and then chase it as the 50-mile-an-hour wind takes it down the street, and then come back a year later and go, this is the leaf. It seems like a better thing to do is, hey, wait a minute, I can see they're all coming from this this branch structure, and they're coming down this trunk.
Yeah.
And I'll bet anything that it starts in the ground. I bet anything there's a beginning to all this.
Yeah.
And then I'm looking at what's falling, and it seems like these acorns somehow are involved in this cycle. So then you Google acorn.
Yeah.
And you go, hey, the great oak grows from the acorn, right? And that's why I love these stories about bioweapons in Ukraine. Why don't you just go to the Cossack dance where the whole thing happened? Why do you go through all these things where we have to produce, I have to make all these videos about UP8 and UP4?
Yeah, don't track down all the periphery. You go back down to the center. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I want to do a video where Homer Simpson's doing the Cossack dance saying, hey, I'm one of you. Hey, I'll kick one leg out for a bioweapon, kick the other leg out for a nuke. I just think there's Matt Groening, if you're out there, I think there's a Simpsons episode here of how the Ukrainian bioweapons really happened. So, Tommy, tell us, you wanted to break down a Kolomoisky.
I wanted you to give me a Kolomoisky breakdown.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this. If you follow him, oh, jeez. I don't know if I want to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. Kolomoisky's a very big supporter of Israel. Okay. And so is Avi Braverman. And so are a lot of the other people we've been talking about with these bioweapons. And they were looking for this genetic thing that could potentially target Palestinians. Avi Braverman was we've been talking about him for 6 years, was the guy overseeing Palestine several times. He's changed party, doesn't matter. He's in the dark Mossad, not bad Mossad, but dark weapons, okay? Kolomoisky is his buddy. Kolomoisky is the guy who makes the money on the other side of the dark weapons. The military technology moves out commercially to attenuated viruses, and then you make money with the vaccines. And you make so much money that you have to buy half of Cleveland in real estate, or half of 20 different cities. So that's where it comes from, is this desire for Israel. And again, strong supporter, wanted my kids to serve in the IDF. So this is not Israel bashing. But what I am saying is there was this plan to say, hey, wait a minute. Why Mark Rich was the head guy. Why don't we take these scientists out of Biopreparat and have a lab there where they all can have villas on the Black Sea. They get down to Sochi once a year for skiing. And then have them do pilgrimages to Israel, develop these weapons. And that way, Israel could self-finance this thing for other people that are interested in the same kind of genetic targeting. And the big program Mark Rich worked on was South Africa. And that was a black bomb. Wouter Basson was the guy running that for the Defense Forces of South Africa. And they also had a program in Zimbabwe, right? So this thread here is of genetic targeting, and I really do believe they blew it up with Tay-Sachs, because it was kind of a Guillain-Barré trying to target it at the Palestinian, and they found out that the Palestinian and Jewish people are so closely intertwined that it ended up becoming a Jewish scourge, as well as a Palestinian scourge. But I don't want to get off the track on Tay-Sachs, but I'll just say that this whole thing was ethnic cleansing from day one. the Mark Rich, way before the Cossack dance, way before Rich Steele is doing the Cossack dance, they saw it as, hey, this could be ethnic cleansing here. We can bring these scientists in, and we got it. And any country that wants to do ethnic cleansing and ethnic targeting could be our client here. This is dark Mossad, bad Mossad. I think there's a good Mossad, Jared and company, BB, etc. But that's what I'm talking about here is why not just go right to the acorn and say, acorns make trees. I've studied this, it's the science of this, and this is the acorn that started this all. It was Christopher Steele, was the celebration, both for the nukes and the bios. It was in Kiev, it was at this wedding. Here's the wedding photos. Here's Christopher Steele and his wife sitting next to Putin. This is where it all happened. And I think what happened at that table, and I'm not saying Kolomoisky was a waiter at the wedding. I think Kolomoisky was actually at the wedding as an up-and-coming industrialist for various firms, international firms, mining and oil, but we'll have people do the research. But you get the idea here, is this movement called Chabad in Ukraine needed cash. You need an army. You need money. You need some real estate. You need some place to put all this stuff. And if you go back to the history of the Pale Settlement and the history of the Jews, Catherine the Great, I hate to bring up Catherine the Great because everybody always thinks of the horse, but the other thing that she did other than the horse, what the horse says, was she gave the Jews the Pale Settlement. And that was a strip of land going from the, I think, at one time, the Pale changed in size, but it went from the Baltic all the way to the Black Sea. It was a connecting place where Jews could conduct business. And why did Catherine the Great want them? John O'Loughlin covered this beautifully in several books. But why did they want that? They wanted the mercantile skills of the Jews to raise the peasants up because they had no idea of how to, banking, lending, commerce. They just didn't have those skills. And the problem came after Catherine the Great when the Jews went into Moscow and kind of created started competing with the competing interests. But what I'm saying is this Chabad movement, this land movement of the Pale was created then, right around 1800 something. And the mindset that the Chabad movement, that we get land, we were promised this. This is our birthright here. We fought and died for this thing, right? Even though this Pale went away, I think in 1917, I think, and then the Balfour Agreement set aside for Israel as sort of a compensatory thing. There were a lot of Chabad people that said, no, Israel ain't no compensation for the Pale. There ain't no oil. There's a lot of things. Good in the summer. Go to Tel Aviv in the summer, Tommy. See a lot of girls there in bikinis. I'm telling you, it'll be fun for you. But I'm just saying the Pale is where all the juice is. That's where all the minerals, the oil pipelines, everything, the strategic stuff is. And there was a group, my co-founder, or the founder of Neighborhood News, says it was the Jewish company, and Rabbi Schneerson, and then Chabad became Chabad Lubavitch as they added another leader named Lubavitch. But if you look at all the people that are involved in this dark Mossad, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of Chabad and there's a lot of Lubavitch. I'm not sure which is more. Some days I think it's more Lubavitch, some days I think it's more Chabad. But Kolomoisky is the number one man for Chabad Lubavitch. And that means taking stuff by whatever means possible, getting all the cash, and then putting it back into programs to get more stuff and get more cash. Because we don't own everything yet. It is a very Israel without borders kind of, it's not even Israel, it's the Chabad movement. First we get back what Catherine the Great promised us, and then we get everything else. So in the case of Ukraine, it's everything to the east of the Dnieper River, including Donbass and Lugansk. And you know what? those dumb pig farmers that are in the way are going to be bioweapons tested. Here's your chance to either leave the country right now or be a pig and get tested on with the bioweapons. That's why I think we went from 11 biolabs to 30 biolabs. It's Kolomoisky all the way. I hate to say Zelensky's a pimple on Kolomoisky's ass, but Zelensky's a pimple on Kolomoisky's ass. And the whole world is making Zelensky out like he's the juice. He's not the juice. The juice is Kolomoisky. So anyway, that was a long historical thing, but that's how they think. And if you don't get into the psychology of what the criminal mind thinks, you're never going to solve the crime. If Kolomoisky sat down right next to me and he just heard me say that, he goes, "How did you know that?" That would be his response. It wouldn't be, "That's a bunch of bullshit." He'd go, "How the hell have you been talking to my wife? Did you talk to Eric Braverman?" Tommy, 5 years ago, we said Eric Braverman didn't like laundering the bioweapons for the Clinton Foundation. We said he was going to go to Israel because his life was in danger here in the United States. We said wherever he's going with, there are going to be the military interests in Israel that are going to be protecting him. And guess who we was meeting with? We started the series 6 years ago. Eric Braverman. Where's Eric Braverman? He was meeting with Kolomoisky. That's all you need to know. He is the back channel to the Congress. He is the back channel to all the money that's coming out of the Congress, all the USAID that's coming out of the US Congress, USAID. If he's getting all the money from USAID, $6 billion at a time, he's getting all the money from IMF, $15 billion at a time. What makes you think he wouldn't get the USAID predict money for the vaccines? Doesn't make any sense. He's getting all the money. A little tiny bit's trickling down to the vaccines. So anyway, that's a long description of Kolomoisky, but that's why I was following Kolomoisky in 2018.
So if Kolomoisky is a big supporter of Israel, would that mean that Mossad would have a vested interest in protecting Kolomoisky?
I think there's a split in Mossad. I think there's people who say our borders are tough enough to protect. Let's not go bite off a bigger, once we decide to land the aircraft carrier, I mean, Israel's a small country about the size of New Jersey, right? We got 7 Arab nations that seem to all want to attack us every once in a while. I got enough to worry about on my frontiers here.
Sure.
Let's take some buffer land, leave us rum. Let's do the Hitler leave us rum for a while. But you want to go, Kolomoisky, you guys want to go, this is BB talking, you guys want to go and start chomping into Ukraine. Do you know how many millions of people the Russians lost, for an inch of Odessa soil? They're going to fight tooth and nail. You go in with the bioweapons, you think that's a force multiplier. They're going to just come get your biolab. And they did. That's what this thing is all about, right? It's Kolomoisky constantly poking the bear in the Putin bear in the eye. They're both at the same wedding, for crying out loud. I'm not saying that the Kolomoisky was the waiter, the table server, but you wouldn't believe how many of the people involved in the bioweapons game today were at that wedding, right? But you keep poking the bear with all these breakouts that supposedly happened by accident over and over 100 times the normal frequency, and then pretty soon the guy is going to say, I know the game. I think Christopher Steele's still mad about the relationship between Putin and his wife, but that's a personal thing. That's just a speculation. But they're there at the same table. If my sources are correct on this, and again, I'm not trying to say this is a big story. I'm saying this is total rank speculation. I never saw the picture. But supposedly there's a picture just like the Mike Flynn picture with Christopher Steele and his wife next to Putin at their wedding. Take it for what it's worth. I think they may even have met there.
Jesus.
Remember what happens. Remember what happens to Yeltsin after the wedding, after the Cossack dance. I had heard that he actually had danced on a table with a Cossack dance. You know how hard that is when you get off center? You got to be on center. You know, those wedding type round tables, right? You got to kind of be kicking. I don't know. I'm just saying, this guy was probably pretty athletic. Who knows what Putin and his wife were doing? But then Yeltsin gets thrown out. They bring Yeltsin over here to sign all the paperwork, to sign off all the major Russian corporations. Lee Stranahan covers this brilliantly with Kolomoisky and Bill Browder, selling Russia by the pound. But they had a restriction back then where the Russian had to own 51% of the corporation. So like Yukos Oil and all these things that they were selling off, left, right, and center. The money plane is a big article. You needed to have 50% Russian. Christopher Steele, and Chris, you know this is the truth. You were in charge of the poisoning program of the Russians that got the 51%. They killed a lot and poisoned a lot of Russian oligarchs that were on the other side of these business deals, of these joint ventures from the fall of the Soviet Union. Chris, I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. And the program, the assassination program, was based in Ukraine. And Chris, I'm telling the truth, right? So you get the feeling here is, wait, what did they do with the holdouts who they didn't get to and didn't poison? I remember after the 2016 election, there was like 8 guys that died, 8 Russian oligarchs that died. 3 of them were in the Trump Hotel
Jesus.
in Hollywood Beach. One guy was swimming in a pool in Egypt. They all dying all over the place. One guy was at an art museum, got shot in the back. So Oleg Deripaska, the other guy with a mansion right next to Zelensky's in Italy on the Amalfi Coast, Forte de Marmi is the name of the town. He had the job of going around. Magnitsky was the treasurer, and they had all these tough guys, just like Kolomoisky, with baseball bats and machine guns. They would go in, they would beat the snot out of the people in these corporations who hadn't given up their other 50% to Chris Steele's business partners, right? They would steal the corporate seal. They would steal all the books, right? And they would leave. And Oleg Deripaska would kill you if you talked about it after that. Magnitsky was the treasurer for all this, of all these ill-gotten. When everyone done poisoning and all the intimidation wouldn't work, then Deripaska was the assassin in charge of taking the corporate books and taking the corporate seal. So all these people that you think of as different, like, oh, we're going to go get Deripaska's Queen K yacht. I'm like, he's in on it. They're all in it. They're all at the wedding, right? It's the Cossack dance wedding, right? So they were all into this. Now, and he's closely associated with Rothschild. I don't want to make this a Rothschild thing, but he is closely associated with Rothschild, Deripaska. He's very close friends with Nate Rothschild. So you just wonder, it's like, at what point do you go, you know what, I think I'm going to just tell the whole world what this really is. It's really the Cossack wedding dance that explains all of this. But I've hesitated because, it's rumor and whatnot. But if you were out there, I was only one country away. If you were out there at the wedding, please contact me and send me your wedding photos. How could you miss Christopher Steele Cossack dancing on your table? You probably had your wine spilled. But Tommy, you see what you did? You made me carry the show because you're hungover, and now you got me to spill out.
This is your fault that I'm hungover. You got Peter Struck to respond to us.
That's true. You probably thinking I better do a will.
No, it's fine. I've already accepted I'm going to be killed for one of my 700 other guests.
Okay. All right. Well, Ken Allenbeck would be the one.
Ken Allenbeck will get me. Malone will get me. CIA ground branch guys. Somebody's getting me. Don't worry about it. You're muted.
Sorry. I spit the story out in a not a good way, and I'll probably edit this and destroy this tape so that this can't get out, because I didn't want to ever tell that story.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
But she, look into her, Tommy, and if you had a little time over this week, look into her and what she was doing with these rugs. And there was something else she collected. But how many rugs can you have? And she died at 43. You know, I mean, most people don't even get a house till they're 30. You know, maybe I don't know, 30, 35. I don't know. But she's got like an incredible collection of rugs. I think she did because um, the the Cambridge Five. You got to go. We just have got. We'll do the Cambridge Five and how all the half of the U.S. uranium was sent to Russia in the next show.
All right.
And the guys who brokered it were the David Hunts of the world. Her father.
I will make sure to not be hungover next time. I also wasn't banking on a 2-day hangover.
You must have. What did you have? Guinness or something, or what?
It was started at like a dinner, and we were just kind of hanging out. And next thing I know, it was like 4 in the morning. We were debating whether or not to go shoot machine guns. I'm not even kidding. We're absolutely shit faced. That's the last thing I remember is us deciding whether or not to go like start a fire and shoot it. I'm not even kidding. Like it was just, and I just woke up with like
Tommy, I will tell you one thing right now. I went out on St. Patty's Day and I did get a beer, and I got a Guinness for you. I was thinking of Tommy Carrigan, and I'll send you a picture.
Thank you. I genuinely wasn't even planning to drink that night. I went to a dinner, and like halfway through, I was offered a beer, and I like didn't want to be rude, and it started with a beer and it ended with, I'll feed you the ammo, you fire downrange, and we'll declare war on this fire. Good Lord.
Okay. Well, I had to carry the story here, but I had a story that I wanted to, I really, when I met Michael Isikoff, I with McDuff, I really wanted to ask him about the second wedding, because I thought, hey, second wedding, there's probably a few people that have known him for a long time and were at the first wedding. I don't know. There's probably a whole bunch of people who weren't. You know, the bride's people are all going to be different. Maybe there's only a couple. But here's the one thing I did want to say is Struck and McCabe used Christopher Steele to rinse every one of their cockamamie releases to the press. And rather than give stuff and breadcrumb directly to the press, they also had Glenn Simpson to do that for their false narratives. They would just give it to Christopher Steele. That was their go-to guy, right? The CIA guys would go, like Clapper and those guys, Brennan, they would go through, and Hillary Clinton especially would go through Glenn Simpson. But their go-to guy, because they had worked this bioweapons thing together, Andy McCabe lived in Paris for a long time, and Struck was Kosovo, right in there, Eastern Europe, since they worked counterintelligence. That is where they went. Their go-to guy in the UK was Christopher Steele for dropping fake narratives. And then he would come, fly over, they would go to this Tabard Inn near George Washington University, and they'd sit there and have a couple of beers or coffee. I can't remember. I asked the guy. We stayed in the bridal suite. They're mostly small rooms, but we stayed in the bridal suite so he could be in the same room that Christopher Steele was in. And we thought maybe he left a couple of vials around here. We could, have it bioseparated. I mean, you would just, if we had one anthrax vial with some bentonite, that Ken Alabek spun up for Saddam Hussein for starting, one of the wars. We just kind of were looking near the fireplace and stuff. We didn't find it. But that's how they did the false narratives. Struck knows I know, right? I think there's like 50 other people who are actually in Washington and know a lot more than I do. So if you're at the wedding, either one, come forward. And with that, Tommy, I think we should wrap it up.
I think you're going to get me killed. Whatever. The podcast will go down in glory. Yeah, we will resume next week, and I'll make sure not to be half dead. And George,
you get a pass. You get a pass this week, Tommy, because I had to spit that out. We'll be able to do it quicker next time. Yeah, there you go.
No, nothing to do with time. I'm just going on like hour 40 of a hangover right now that should have finished yesterday. But it is what it is. George, I'll send you this episode when it's uploaded. What were you gonna say?
What do you do for hangover cure? Do you do tomato juice, or what do you do?
Ton of Pedialyte, GABA, GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. It's one of the things that gets depleted when you drink. It can cause kind of like anxiety and shaking. You can get it at Walmart. Sometimes magnesium. But I mean, honestly, 99% of it is you just gotta white knuckle it. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why I don't.
Here you are. Tell us this gal again.
Dr. Aditi Bhargava. She's the head of mRNA research at UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. She worked on the Biden campaign, and after seeing Biden come out and say it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated, she kind of has just gone in the opposite direction now, and is really just doing everything she can to inform people about just how dangerous the vaccines are. She's a wonderfully brilliant soul. I love her.
Yeah.
But
well, very, very cool, Tommy. Let's play it out here. And thanks to Tommy Carrigan. And I'm George Webb. And we'll see you all next week. You think Saturday is still a good time? Or
sure, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Tommymoisky, Tommy or Putin, Wuhan Webb is
okay.
We'll eventually be killed. Don't worry about it. George, thank you so much. I won't be hungover next time, I promise. And shout out Peter Strzok, I guess, for I don't know.
For recognizing your podcast.
You know, no, you know what? No, screw you, Peter Strzok. You're not allowed to watch my podcast. That's my last ones. All right, George. Take care, man.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Thanks, everybody else.